All right, Vijay, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing what you have to say about the Internet of Things and how that pertains to cars. But let's kick things off kind of with a context-setting video you guys sent to us that kind of sets the stage and shows some of the concepts. So can we roll the video?
Imagine that you're a busy professional who commutes to work in the city. You love to drive and have a little fun whenever you can. That's why you own the ultra-smart, cloud-connected Ford Evos concept. The cloud is the place where all of your important data and personal information are stored. But thanks to the Ford Evos concept, you don't even have to think about that. Your Ford Evos knows all about your preferences, your needs, your health, your work schedule, and more. The car has the power to pull and process information from the cloud to provide you with a seamless, connected lifestyle.
Cool. All right. So it's a constantly connected car. It's connected. It's got pipelines into the cloud to do all kinds of stuff. So what do you do with that? I mean, great idea. But what kinds of things are you looking at?
Well, it's really to support our constantly connected consumer. So
Right.
we look at the consumers out here, and certainly the notion of this conference where it's an always-on world, and consumers want to have access to their back-end services and be able to leverage those, inside their vehicle as well as outside their vehicle. I think really gave notion to this new concept of the Evos concept, where inside the vehicle, using voice recognition and using persistent networking technology, that you'd be able to connect to the things that you're used to connecting to outside of the vehicle.
So how far along, you say this is a concept, how far along is the concept? Are you building this in the lab? Do you have actual cars?
Well, I think we've been evolving elements of this concept, for several years now. So back in 2005, when we started with our Sync platform, the first evolution that we had was building out a service delivery network that actually made some of this stuff real. So, we instantiated E911 Assist on the platform. We instantiated, voice-based turn-by-turn navigation, where, you could actually just say the name of an address and it would basically give you voice-based turn-by-turn, and, being able to look up things like sports scores and news and stock. So building out that service delivery network, was sort of the first evolution of that. As we went forward, sort of 2008, 2009, we developed our AppLink platform, which is actually a mobile app on the phone that allows you to basically interface through that AppLink portlet to a number of different services on the back end. That includes Pandora and Stitcher and a whole bunch of other back end services, through voice-based, platforms. So, those two steps are already two evolutions that we've taken. Now, beyond that, we've begun to really look at much more chatty-based mechanisms of communication, using messaging protocols and things like that, using a much more static connection, using embedded modems inside the vehicle that allow you to do a lot more. Also being able to collect, rich data from sensors on board the vehicle and be able to do much more around health diagnostics and proactive, warranty management and things like that. So some of those features are still in development, and I anticipate that we'll be able to launch them over the next few years.
Okay, so you brought up a whole bunch of things there. I almost don't know where to start, but let me back up a little bit back to the AppLink thing that you discussed. Like, it seems to me that one of the things that's interesting about Ford's approach to what we used to call telematics, and now I suppose we call the connected car, is that early on you seem to take this approach that you didn't have to own the connectivity, right? That people already had smartphones and they were using smartphones for more and more things, like you mentioned Pandora, for instance, that you might want to use while you're in the car. So in a way, the car becomes an extension of that, or almost an accessory for the phone, right?
Yep.
Which is a bit of a different approach than trying to build the computer into the car and have the car be, everything for you, right? Do you think, I mean, is that a fair characterization of your evolution? Has that informed the way that you're thinking now about how to integrate with the connected consumer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the broad-in strategy, which is what we called it, is and will continue to be, an integral part of our strategy moving forward. And broad-in was so powerful because we recognized that the center of people's universe was their smartphone, all right? Mm-hmm. That's where their apps lie, that's where their phone contacts lie, that's where, their favorite pictures lie, all of those different sorts of things. And, we didn't want to replicate things that people already had, on their phones inside the vehicle and create sort of complexity and confusion for them. So some of our customers instantiated, their own connectivity on board the vehicle, and there was a duplicate phone number and things like that, and, a person that they would call into in terms of, if they had an accident. We felt that the phone was sort of the center of a person's universe, and we wanted to make sure that we continued to leverage that as well as the trends around smartphone connectivity. Going forward, we have and we already also recognize that there may be some instances where a more persistent level of connectivity is required. So things like in battery electric vehicles, to be able to do route optimization and be able to monitor and update battery software and things like that, a broad-in strategy, is probably not as robust as one where there's more persistent connectivity.
Yeah, you don't want to rely on the phone.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a mix based upon, what the consumer needs are in a particular space. Luxury brands may have a slightly different strategy, but I think both broad-in and persistent connectivity are both going to be parts of the strategy moving forward.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something along there about kind of health, potential health applications, and that to me is like almost mind-blowing that your car could be involved in managing your health somehow. Can you tell us how, what kind of research you guys are doing in that department?
Yeah, I mean, so, health applications, I think, are something that are going to be really amazing opportunities as you go forward. So both from, how can we help different kinds of drivers who have potentially different health conditions to be able to drive more effectively or even drive for that matter. So, an example where we did a proof of concept in our labs was really using brain monitor sensors to identify when people potentially were having seizures and be able to actually invoke some of the features on board the vehicle, like adaptive cruise control or active park assist, to be able to safely steer them, or even our E911 assist, right? So you think about situations where people really haven't had the ability to drive because they've been blindly characterized into a bucket of having a certain condition, and
epilepsy or something, right? Yeah.
Epilepsy or something like that. And how do you then begin to leverage technology to be able to, inside the vehicle, to be able to give them some opportunity. Another thing is in India, a couple of years ago, we enabled some functions where the physicians could actually use the vehicle as a diagnostic tool in rural areas and be able to leverage some of the onboard componentry to write apps so that they could diagnose villagers in remote villages with add-ons on top of the vehicle platform to be able to take some basic diagnostics and remotely transmit that back to a centralized location where they could do some automated diagnoses and things like that. So think about that in terms of where the vehicle is sort of a mobile sort of ambulance on wheels.
So you go for a ride and it can tell what your heart rate is and your breathing rate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whether you're pale or
yep.
sweating too much or something.
Absolutely.
Do you have a road rage detector so that it can tell me when I need to lock the doors and keep me from getting out?
Oh, well, we can certainly put that on our list of potential applications. But, certainly everybody's talked about the few too many drinks, right. application, or right. the my eyes are getting drowsy application. So yep. certainly with cameras inside the vehicle, you can do a whole lot of different features. But I mean, part of our strategy is really to really focus a lot on what consumers want as well. So
yeah, how do people feel about that? I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but then if you get in the car and the car is like, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't let you do that," right? You're like, you might get very angry.
Yeah, and I mean, I think
especially if you're drunk.
I mean, and that's kind of and that's kind of the balance that we have to play as an automaker, right? I mean, we're
right.
not we're not the lawmakers, or we're not
right.
the police, right? So what we want to do is really make applications possible that will help support vehicles and safety and regulations, in a number of different scenarios. And then, based upon what actually gets instantiated, I think is going to be based upon, what society demands at that point in time, what will really help invoke and support, legal driving at that point. So, I mean, that's going to be a constant evolution, and, But our job from a technology standpoint is to make that technology available to our consumers.
Okay. And then if they want it, or if the regulatory agencies allow it.
Right, or if their parents want it.
Right. Actually, I have a daughter who's 12. If that's ready in 4 years.
Well, I was talking to somebody about, having 4 different keys, right, in the family where, you as the dad could control which key your daughter got.
Oh, right. She doesn't get the one with
that
performance
key, right?
mode.
She can only get 5 radio stations, and it doesn't include Howard Stern, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and she can't tweet while she's driving.
Right, that kind of stuff, yeah.
So the Internet of Things, right? We were talking backstage about this and how this concept actually came out in '99, I think, from MIT, where you went. How do when I think of the Internet of Things, like up until now, it's been sort of an empty term as we're getting to the enablement of IPv6 and the ability to give everything a unique IP address, whether it's my watch or my belt buckle, or each tire of my car can have its own IP address, right? I mean, that opens up a lot of possibilities for being able to address different devices and connect them. How does that fit into your vision?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the Internet of Things is about 3 things. It's about connectivity, capability, and data. And as you think about the vehicle as part of that overall paradigm, I think it's very, very powerful. So, this always connected paradigm inside the vehicle allows you to be able to personalize much more richly and learn and adapt based on whatever's going on. So, imagine that you're a driver driving in different conditions with the same vehicle than somebody else. One of the things that you could envision is that you would get a different update for your engine performance to optimize, your driving, condition. Or imagine that you're a performance driver versus a green driver, There's different calibration settings that we can put on the vehicle to personalize. So the connectivity really allows for that level of personalization. The second thing is the capability around the processing. And as we think about things like voice recognition and speech recognition, that's going to be such a key enabler for our vehicle. So to be able to understand natural language processing. I was recently out at IBM where we took a look at Watson, that won the Jeopardy competition, and the spoken language processing of that's impressive. As computing power really begins to shrink into smaller and smaller devices, the richness of voice recognition grows to a whole new world. And then finally, data. The amount of data that we're generating off of vehicles, it's just immense. Terabytes and terabytes within an hour. And to be able to filter through that and process it and apply statistical models gives you all kinds of new possibilities. So, if you think about the vehicle as this intelligent node as part of the Internet of Things, we're just at the beginning of that journey.
How long until you have press conferences announcing the latest upgrade to the car OS that you're running?
We don't have anything to announce sort of in the immediate future, but I'm hopeful in the near future that we do have something.
Okay, so it's conceivable that I could buy a car next year, and then the year after there'd be new features that I would download with the new OS.
It's certainly possible, yeah.
Okay. I want to take some audience questions, but I have one question that I'm dying to ask you about self-driving vehicles. How does that fit into your vision, and how far off do you think it is before these become commonplace?
Yeah, I think this whole notion of autonomous or self-driving vehicles is something that's been really on the minds of many, probably like the Hyperloop or anything else that people are talking about these days. But at the end of the day, we've already been on this journey of autonomy, for several years now. I just drove from Detroit to New Jersey and back over the last couple of weeks, and I used the adaptive cruise control feature, which allows you to adjust speeds, based upon how fast the driver in front of you is driving. We have active park assist, where I can pull into a parallel parking spot, without any sort of assisting. So autonomous features, I think, are going to be consistently and continuously going to be introduced into the vehicle. And at Ford, we're paying attention to this space very closely to see, what companies like Google and others are doing to see what they're introducing, how, robust that level of autonomy is. Now, given that we're a consumer-driven company, autonomy's got to be something that, the consumer desires as well, to be in an environment, where they feel that they can safely be driven from point A to point B using autonomous vehicles. So I think, a truly autonomous vehicle operating in an environment that's not, full of autonomous vehicles is probably still a number of years away. I think,
like 5 years?
I actually think that, a number of autonomous vehicles operating in diverse environments from New York to San Francisco to, Shanghai to, Middle America are probably more like a decade away, in my opinion. But I think a lot of the features that instantiate that are going to be rolled onto vehicles, much sooner than that. It's just going to be directed by consumers, So how do you leverage cameras to, look at lanes and look at lane departure? How do you automate, coordination with traffic lights, for example, So,
So it's an increasing amount of kind of assistance rather than complete
Absolutely,
autonomy.
yeah.
All right. Personally, I can't wait until, I want to be able to have manual override at all times, but I can't wait until I can get on the 101 going south and then just say, all right, now drive me to Santa Barbara, well, let me read a book.
You just don't have a Mustang, though.
No, I don't.
If you had a Shelby Mustang, you'd be like, all right, let me take control of that vehicle. So.
That's true. Are there any audience questions for Vijay here about Ford? And I see a hand right over there. I think there's a mic runner right next to you, so hang on and let's hear your question.
Quick question. On the connectivity, we have it on the Metropolitan so far. What happens if you are at Yosemite? So the car doesn't talk to you?
You're at like Yosemite, you said?
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah,
signal.
I think that's one of the biggest, questions and architectures that we have to really solve for, right? So clearly, where there's no connectivity available, the vehicle has to be, self-sustaining within that particular environment, right? So we're always going to have a level of self-sustenance in terms of your vehicle's capabilities interacting with the driver in terms of the core and base vehicle function, all right? But if you're in Yosemite, for example, you may not be able to access, real-time Pandora at that point in time. And that's why we have to look at things like caching architecture and storage and things like that, on board the vehicle and say, okay, for your favorite and most persistent services that you use, what level of caching that you want to have on board the vehicle so that if you're in remote environments where, connectivity is either extremely weak or non-existent, for those consumer-driven features that are sort of personalized, how much is actually stored on board the vehicle versus being completely reliant on the cloud. So it's an architectural question, but certainly in terms of all of the core functions on board the vehicle, those are all going to be, completely instantiated on board.
But
All right, we have
Ford car could still talk to each other regardless if you're in the urban.
Absolutely. V2V is something that, we're certainly looking at in terms of
vehicle to vehicle.
Vehicle to vehicle,
Okay.
yeah, in terms of those architectures.
Okay, we have time for just one more question. I think there's a hand back there that, I'm sorry, he was first.
So you sidestepped the question a little bit earlier, but how do you think about the boundaries of cognitive load in the vehicle? Because let me give you context. I work in education, and I work for the nation's largest private educator, responsible for mobile strategy. One of our goals is to capture unproductive time for students during the day. Big factor is cars. Naturally, we want to do something for students in the car, but there's certainly a concern about cognitive load. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not an expert in terms of cognitive load. So, we have an entire group that basically looks at, and runs a number of experiments based upon what a driver can handle at a particular point in time. But certainly, part of it is, cognitive load also continues to change in terms of, how people interact in different environments, today versus how they may have, adapted and interacted at other points in time. We have a certain set of measures and metrics that, we need to make sure are consistent based upon how alert and active, drivers are to different conditions, that may exist in road conditions. So, for whatever services that we introduce on board the vehicle, we continue to make sure that whatever we throw at them in terms of whether it's, voice-based responses or alerts or icons on dashboards and things like that. They're able to handle a certain set of conditions inside both the virtual track as well as real-life driving situations before those vehicles are launched. But to be honest with you, it's a very challenging and also very driver-dependent sort of a paradigm. But certainly, our focus has been more around voice-based and speech-based service, acquisition, as opposed to, others who seem to be completely comfortable, having dashboards that, deliver a lot of, information while you're actually driving. So, we feel very strongly that, your visual eyes on the road is really critical to, that overall safety.
Okay. Cool. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like we just scratched the surface here, and I'd love to hear more about Ford's plans and kind of the future of smart cars, if that's the term, or connected cars. But
would love to come back another time and talk about it.
Cool. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah,
Vijay.
thank you.
Appreciate it.